Yes, love's a secret weapon. Yeah!
Hi, I'm Donna Loren.
And I'm Dr. Adam Gerace.
And you are listening to Love's a Secret Weapon podcast.
Welcome back to our podcast. And in our fourth episode, Donna continues reading from her autobiography, Love's a Secret Weapon. Chapter 2, I Didn't Know the Gun Was Loaded. Mid-century culture spawned the world of Disney and the Mickey Mouse Club. Mickey Mouse, of course, was a cartoon star in the 1930s, but when Walt Disney diversified into the amusement park industry in 1955, he developed the Mickey Mouse Club to help fund his new project, Disneyland. To this day, some of our favourite celebrities were born from that iconic show. 1950s America's Sweetheart, Annette Funicello, and even more recently, Britney Spears and Justin Timberlake. So, here comes Donna as she receives her ears. Go, Donna.
Just before my 10th birthday, I was taken to audition for the Mickey Mouse Club. My mother, brothers, and I made the colossal trek from Mar Vista out to Burbank on 2 buses, maybe 3, to the Disney studios. My dad was on the lot where he drew animation for Disney and surprised me when he showed up on the huge soundstage where the auditions were held. There were maybe 30 to 50 children auditioning on that day. That's what they used to refer to as a cattle call. There was a long table with 10 or so adults that you had to perform for. My mother and brothers sort of disappeared into the woodwork when my dad showed up. I was the focus of his attention, and on automatic, doing what I thought should be, and that is singing with a sense of responsibility for my family. But miraculously, my love of singing perpetuated me into another space, a space of joy. At the end of my performance, they applauded and seemed to like it a lot. Maury and I were called over to the table. One of the people, who I can only assume was an authority, spoke up to my dad and said, "We want her to be a Mouseketeer." Maury's reply was stunning. Quote, "But she's a solo," unquote. I realized Maury didn't want me to be in a lineup. This really perplexed me. I thought to myself, I love the Mickey Mouse Club. I watch it all the time. I would love to be a Mouseketeer. Not only that, but this was part of the plan for me to be successful and ultimately take care of my family. In retrospect, I'm sure that the producers had to deal with a great many stage parents, so they accepted what Maury said, and he was told, "Well then, we'll arrange for her to be a special guest on the Talent Roundup." It was decided that I would be featured on one of the Talent Roundup Friday specials that would discover new talent and make them an honorary Mouseketeer. What was he thinking? That night at the dinner table, our business meeting place, my dad discussed with my mother how I would be making more money in one day than he could earn in a week with overtime. Then they turned to me and discussed the decision to reject the proposal to be a Mouseketeer. There was no differentiation between parent and child in this moment. I was being treated as an adult, being expected to comprehend this sense of responsibility to provide for a family of 5. The Mickey Mouse Club was the first occasion for me to design what I wore. Previously, my mother had made my performance dresses, but this time I had to get my 3 cents in. The thought never came to me just to go shopping for an outfit. That didn't fit the lifestyle of my family, which was more or less middle class. We were fortunate to own a house that Maury received funding for as a veteran. Our 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house cost $1,500 in 1948 and had a wall heater and a fireplace. Beside the homemade dresses my mother made for me, I usually got hand-me-downs from my cousin Joan, who was a year or 2 older than me. My mother loved to sew, and on occasion my Grandma Fanny, my mother's mother, would treat me to a special dress. Once she took me to see Aida, the opera, in downtown Los Angeles and bought me an organdy white dress with little red dots all over it. For the Mickey Mouse Club, I designed something very special. My mother and I went to the Fabric Mart and we bought coral corduroy. It was inexpensive, but had texture and a good flow. My idea was to make a complete circle skirt. I told my mother what I wanted and she helped me draw it out, and then she cut it. Then we measured my waist and made a little measurement in the middle of the circle. I wanted it to be a high waist with straps and to have musical notes sewed on it. The wardrobe mistress at Disney told us that I couldn't wear anything white, so my mother and I chose a little light blue blouse, which I already had, that would appear white on a black and white TV set. My big treat to finish off my outfit was getting ballet flats that were made of pink velvet and encrusted with rhinestones at the toe. A little girl almost 10 years old, my legs were like pencils and my feet were like canoes, totally out of proportion. But this expression of creating my own wardrobe for this occasion gave me a sense of fulfillment. I had 3 days working on the Mickey Mouse Club, 2 days of rehearsal, and then on the 3rd day was my performance. A total of 3 hours a day were dedicated to doing schoolwork in a little red trailer on the lot for all minors. Before any rehearsal, I was given a desk and introduced to Cubby and Karen, my schoolmates, for the next 2 days. Tommy and Bobby were there too, but they were older and I was too shy to say anything to them. So, you've got 2nd grade to 12th grade in one little trailer. I was really excited to meet Annette, who was 14 at the time. She was literally someone I could look up to. We rehearsed the 2 songs that I was going to sing, Pennies from Heaven and I Didn't Know the Gun Was Loaded.
I didn't know the gun was loaded, and I'll never, never do it. She'll never, never do it. I'll never do it again.
Sidney Miller, who starred as a child in the East Side Kids, was the director. I had had an accident at school playing volleyball 3 days before my filming. I fell right on my knees when I tried hitting the ball over the net, and I showed up on set with Band-Aids on both knees. That was fine for the first 2 days of rehearsal, but on the 3rd day they had to take the Band-Aids off. The makeup artist decided to cover my scabs with pancake makeup. Ooh, that stings! Consequently, the nurse on set had to wipe it off, which hurt even more. This was no way to prepare for my performance on the Mickey Mouse Club. Finally, a solution. The Band-Aids went back on with an ample amount of pancake over them. The day I performed was my 10th birthday. I still remember how I felt during my performance when I looked up at Cheryl and Annette, who were looking down at me like gloating big sisters. I felt a genuine love coming from their eyes and their beautiful smiles. Unlike so many stories you hear of the big kids mocking the little ones or excluding them, in that moment, they made me feel that they were proud of me. They were so loving and really embraced me for what I was doing. They made me feel so unashamedly proud of myself in that moment. I brought a little book with me to get everybody's autograph after the show. I was a head shorter than Annette, but when she was bending down to sign her name, she looked up at me and said, "I wish I could sing like you." Just days before my 10th birthday, on my way to Disney for rehearsal, my dad and I had stopped at the Board of Education in downtown LA for my work permit. They measured my height and weight and stamped a card. I now had a Social Security number. I didn't know until many decades later the significance of my turning 10. What I discovered those many years later was that my mother had been receiving child support payments from my biological father, and they were to stop at age 10.
Wow, being on the Mickey Mouse Club for a child of the 1950s must have been exciting, Donna.
Yes, it really was. It's like anything. If you are watching television and it comes right into your living room and it's very real for you,
Mm,
I'm sure today, whatever your favorite series is, that you associate, the cast with your own life, and
mm.
they become a member of your family. Um, and that's what the Mickey Mouse Club was for me until I had an opportunity to join them. So, yes.
And when we talk about some of those people from that time, I mean, you would say to, people who grew up on the Mickey Mouse Club, Annette, of course, but then, Cheryl and Karen and Cubby and Bobby and Tommy and Darlene, they were, as you said, they were people's, the people watching at home, they were considered friends. But, in this case, particularly, Karen Pendleton and Cubby O'Brien were your schoolmates for a couple of days as you prepared to perform on the Mickey Mouse Club on the the Friday Talent Roundup.
That was so surreal, Adam. You know, let me just paint a clear picture. First of all, my dad worked at the Disney Studios at the time as an animator, and he was, working on like Lady and the Tramp and Peter Pan and
Fantastic.
Dumbo, and those are the ones that I can remember at the moment. And so when it came time for me to actually, start the job, I would leave with him at the time he needed to be there for his work.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I would get dropped off and literally taken to a little red trailer, which was the schoolhouse, that was parked on the Disney lot near where they were filming, the Mickey Mouse Club. And it was a small trailer. It maybe suited, probably 20 desks, 10 on one side,
Yeah.
10 on the other. And, and to see the faces that you watch on television sitting at a desk and having one teacher supervise you, and literally, from probably first, second grade, maybe third grade, and all the way through to senior high school.
That's crazy, isn't it?
This one person had to supervise your work and answer your questions if you had any. Of course, they were regular, and the other kids literally had to complete their semesters, and I only had to do a couple of days.
Yeah.
So it was very different for me. But being in that environment was very distracting. I don't remember really doing much work other than kind of just feeling totally, like in a little fantasy world
How
of
fantastic.
being with these people that I was admiring and having so much fun with and looking forward to, watching on television. And here I am with them.
Yeah.
So they came to life for sure. And they were all so kind. They were really, really kind. I even had an opportunity many years later at a celebrity convention to see several of them as adults. And they all, well, I saw Cubby and I saw Karen and I saw Tommy, and they were genuinely nice people. So the Disney casting director that made their selection did have kind of an intuition to choose kids that were not spoiled, didn't have an attitude, we're good, upstanding kids, and but I didn't have any adult supervision, like parental supervision, which was a little bit of a big contradiction. And the I don't know, the other kids, I never saw any parents.
It's interesting how they
Maybe they
managed
were.
that. Maybe I don't know. I mean, maybe the chaperone was the teacher or the producer. I'm not sure, but it is interesting in your experience because, of course, Maury, your adopted dad, was so well, both your parents were often very, very close by, and there was always that idea that we had to be close by or something was going to happen. But then, he's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to work. See ya, that kind of thing.
Yep.
It's an interesting contradiction for what you were used to.
Yes, and I don't recall him showing up on set when I was working. I only remember the teacher in the red trailer, and I do remember a nurse, a nurse on set that I think that's legally, you have to have a nurse on set. And as I said in my this chapter, that the day before I started working there, I tried my best to be kind of a normal student when I went to public school, and I think I was in the 5th grade.
What was your school?
And so,
which school was it?
Name of the street, Grandview Boulevard Grammar School.
Yeah.
Elementary school. And I remember the principal was Miss Heller. She was a very, very sweet lady. And I remember most of my teachers as well. I think in the 5th grade I had Miss Johnson.
Back then it was Miss or Mrs., wasn't it? There was no Ms.
Yes. Yeah, you never knew their first name.
Yeah.
But but I did, I did participate in some sports at school, and I got involved in the volleyball game the day before I was supposed to go to work. And, I went for it. I was out there and I went for the ball, over the net, and fell, boom, right on my knees.
I would say this is what happens when you participate in sport, but that's just my own opinion.
Yes. Yeah, then I had quarter-size boo-boos on my knees, and so by the 3rd day, I had kind of scabbing over, and they were starting to heal, but I had Band-Aids, and I was so surprised that they ripped the Band-Aids out. She did, this nurse, ripped the Band-Aids off and tried to, pack it with pancake. I was like, oh, this is not good. And it was, I have to say that seriously, when you have a home environment where life is based on, kind of a struggle or some suffering, that kind of thing, where there's not a whole lot of joy, and there's not a whole lot of safety, that here again in my own life's experience, on the day that I'm supposed to perform, they're packing me with makeup that, hurt me, on my boo-boos, and then they had to wipe it off with alcohol, which was even, worse. And just in my memory, I'm just thinking, okay, well, there is a bit of an imprint on you that when you are controlled in a family, that your esteem, is lessened. You have not, that sense of value for yourself. And so things happen. Things happen that are, kind of match that painful experience that you have at home, but it's unrelated. When you're very young, you don't associate it.
And that's,
but
I was just going to say that I know you've spoken about this, and we will speak about this as we continue the the podcast over episodes, that while this might seem like a bit of an unfortunate misguided attempt by them to try to cover up some Band-Aids with some pancake makeup, you do often speak about subsequent experiences when you were into your teens and so on, that kept sort of coming up, that there was this level of things that would happen that perhaps were because you had been so taught to just acquiesce and just go with what you had to do, that same situations kept developing.
Yes, and how incredibly fortunate I was, to find the balance of life somehow through the music, through associating, with, in this particular case, in the Mickey Mouse Club, all the people, even the adults, you know,
Mm.
even the director,
Mm.
everyone was so kind to me. You know, just albeit this one incident with the
Yeah.
nurse, you know, but it was on the day that I was shooting, you know, so it kind of was like,
They had to
oh,
make it.
and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. They had to make a
kind of
decision,
those
but it kind
wah.
of. Well,
Actually, it's more like, okay, live up to your image of being a trooper. So something had to happen for me to be a trooper.
and that's the thing. You kept talking a lot about this idea that you were always called in your family the trooper, and whether you were sick and you had to keep going. And I know in a few episodes' time, we're going to talk about a time when you were touring on the Dick Clark Caravan of Stars, and the idea when you got sick during that time, you were the trooper. There was that sort of old style idea from vaudeville of you're born in a suitcase and you keep on trucking.
Yes.
Yeah, and so just to take you back before we talk about the performance, because I really want to talk about that, because I think people are really going to be interested in the actual two songs. But this was the first time, because as we mentioned in one of our previous episodes, you created a lot of the costume throughout your career and your performances. But I think, was this the first time that you and your mother worked on a design for the dress that you wore on the Mickey Mouse Club?
Yep. Yes, 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 yes. And boy, what a good initiation, you know, to create something. At least I created the skirt,
Mm.
and my mother was willing to cooperate. And I do recall that when I said I wanted to have um, silver sequence notes
Yeah, music
sewn
notes.
on this
Mm.
this little jumper. You know, I just realized that before I did the Mickey Mouse Club, I used to perform, like when I was 8 years old,
Mm.
I used to perform on a radio show that was basically country music, and that's where I met James Burton,
Yeah,
the guitar player for Elvis
yeah.
Presley. And at the time, I think he was 17 and he was just starting to work with Ricky Nelson.
Mm.
But everyone that was on that particular radio show, and I would go on and perform,
Mm.
and I was the only kid that
Mm.
was there. Everybody else, well, James was 17, but you know, everybody else was an adult. They were all wearing country western clothing with, you know, all these
Yeah.
appliques of, you know, embroidered and fringed and things. And so I think that's what gave me the idea to sew these notes on. And at the time when I was 10, I hadn't learned how to use a sewing machine
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
So, but I do recall hand stitching the notes. You know, my mother, I think, drew like with pencils,
Mm.
you know, where the sequent line, because sequins are strung. I'm sure some people know this, but they're strung onto a thread. And so when you buy them by the yard.
Yeah.
And I just had to follow the line and, you know, and sew it on. But that's what I remember, is that I participated in designing the little skirt, and then I participated in sewing on the notes,
Isn't that
which
fantastic?
it was very gratifying for a
Mm.
10-year-old, you know, or not quite 10. It was just before my birthday.
And isn't that cool that you just kind of click then? You're like, where did I get the inspiration? All of a sudden, this memory of this radio show called, oh, what was it called? Squeakin' Deacon, was that?
Squeakin' Deacon.
That's right.
Yes. Doesn't that sound country and
I
western?
wonder if anyone remembers that's listening. There's probably someone out there that heard it and remembered it. I guess what I sort of want to talk about, this idea of the actual performance. So you had your two songs. First was Pennies from Heaven, which was kind of a slower song, and you kind of performed it with Cheryl, Annette, and Darlene. Sort of doing a dance alongside you and supporting you as you sang that song. What do you remember of performing with the three of them?
Well, I wasn't real confident about, you know, being with them because they were my seniors.
Mm.
You know, it's like that pecking order. You know,
Mm.
when you're at school and the
Mm.
kid, you're the youngest one, and the older kids are like, "Get away from me, kid." You know how it is in a social situation.
Mm.
But these ladies, these young women, were literally so wonderful to me.
Mm.
and they made me feel so welcomed, and they were just genuinely lovely people. Annette, had the reputation of being sweet. I worked with her, on and off for quite a few
Yeah.
years, and that was, held to be true throughout.
Mm.
And Cheryl had, I believe, the kind of personality and lifestyle where eventually, as an adult, she became a philanthropist
Right. Yeah.
and did a lot of charity work. And so you see that beautiful face of hers,
Mm.
and
Mm.
it's the real deal with Annette. Arlene, she would give me friendly glances. Cheryl and Annette were very, very sweet about encouraging me, and if I couldn't make a mark, because the
Mm.
director would say, okay, you start here and you walk here and you do this and you do that. And I really wasn't used to having a director tell me how to move.
I was going to say, you probably hadn't had that before. I know you'd done some, from memory, you'd done some local TV, but this was something quite different.
Yes, well, the local TV that I did were amateur contests, Rocket to Stardom. You have an X, you stand there with the microphone, and the cameras, film you or televise you.
Yeah.
There was another contest, I remember. It was called Al Jarvis, and these were like, tell me, oh my gosh, the I can't think of it.
Like local TV type stuff.
Yes, but your nationwide, international singing and performing contests. What's that called?
Like American Idol type stuff.
Yes. American Idol is really born, from the idea that started, maybe on radio, before television. But when I was in Los Angeles with local television, that was a place where either children or adults had an opportunity to be seen.
Yeah.
And possibly promote their career on a very local level. But it's very much like American Idol or any one of these international contests now that are, giving birth to great, great talent.
Absolutely. And in your case on Mickey Mouse, were there, to get those sort of songs, nailed, were there, do you remember there being quite a few takes, or?
No, it really flowed. Once I was in costume.
Yeah.
And the background music was pre-recorded. It just all flowed.
Great.
And yeah, it was very much in the flow. And I would imagine, I guess because of the attitude of Cheryl and Annette and the director and Jimmy and Roy and the rest of the Mouseketeers, gave me that sense of confidence, so that early in the day and the day before where I was rehearsing with all of them and getting familiar, by the time it came, the only challenge I had was just, sucking up my Band-Aids with the makeup, and that all vanished as soon as the music started, as usual.
Yeah, I was going
all
to
the
say,
fears go away.
Which is so true of so many people talk about, you talk about this, so many people speak about it, that whatever that fear or that anxiety is, when you get in front of what you need to do, you can kind of harness it to be able to perform. There's that bit in the Pennies from Heaven song, and if our audience hasn't seen it, they can catch it on YouTube. But when there's a part of the scene where Annette, you kind of take Annette's arm as part of the song, and just the way that she's looking at you, you can tell she's just being such a supportive person. And here she is, the star of that show, but she's not feeling threatened by someone coming in. She's being supportive, and then she's even, outside of the song, she pays you that wonderful compliment, which was,
yes, and she was really acting like a big sister. And and there were times later in my life when we didn't work, when I went to her home, and she was just, she was a very down to earth girl. and she
Mhm.
didn't let her celebrity, change
Mm.
her outlook on life. She she was she was again, she was the real deal.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably why, and people often say this about certain performers, but I think this is so true that, she kind of became America's sweetheart and people never forgot her. They never forgot her
Yes.
from that time.
And Disney, showcased her ability to dance.
Mm.
She loved dancing. She was a ballerina.
Mm.
She loved dancing, and then she blossomed into this gorgeous woman.
Mm.
And so becoming America's sweetheart at the time is exactly what kids like me, 4 years younger
Mm.
and probably even a little younger, would have a role model, which is fabulous.
Yeah, and she's a good one to have. They did well with, like you said, choosing those kids. They did quite well in who they chose, and of course in the second song you have a bit more involvement with the other performers of the Mickey Mouse Club when you do "I Didn't Know the Gun Was Loaded," which is kind of is that a fun song to sing? That looks like a fun song to sing.
Actually, going back to the radio show with the country music,
Yeah.
That's when I learned that song.
Because
And
is it an Andrew Sisters song? I think.
ooh,
Maybe. Ooh, maybe not.
I don't know the origin
Yeah.
of it, Adam.
Yeah, but you learnt it on the Squeakin' Deacon radio show.
Yes, I did, and it just became one of those kind of theatrical situations where I could take on a part and take on a little bit of a role,
Mm.
and assert myself a little bit. Not that I'm into guns at all,
No,
but
no.
for me it was just a prop, and it was something that I could have fun with, and then just the way that the arrangement developed, gave me an opportunity to just belt out the last chorus. So
Yeah.
so that was a lot of fun, and it kind of blew people's minds, because I was always very petite.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And whenever you see a big voice coming out of or hear a big voice coming out of a little person,
yeah,
it's kind of it's like, where did that come from?
Well, that's what happens when the soda person doesn't. What was it? They gave you a vanilla milkshake instead of a chocolate one, and that's why you tried to shoot him in the skit, and it all kind of went from there. Don't make that mistake again.
You've got it. You've got it exactly right. When I order a chocolate malt, I don't mean vanilla, and that's when they started.
Did you? Because you said you knew I Didn't Know the Gun Was Loaded. Were the songs just chosen based on what they wanted to do on the show? Was there some input of, well, what sort of songs did you know, and that's how that came about? Was it just a coincidence that you happened to know I Didn't Know the Gun Was Loaded? Or
I seriously, I don't recall, but it's a possibility that I auditioned with those songs.
Sure. Yeah.
And I wouldn't put it past them to choose, especially for what they call the talent roundup guest, to perform what they auditioned with. And, it's a kind of a shoe-in, a guaranteed good performance. So no experimentation.
And you did that a lot. I mean, I know you sort of had your sort of go-to songs, sort of later on when you were performing for Dr. Pepper. You had stuff like, Won't You Come Home, Bill Bailey, and some of the other ones escape me at the moment. But the sort of go-tos that when you needed to do something in a pinch, you could often do it. Of course, this wasn't.
Yes.
This was much more performed, but you sort of had that bag of those songs from the 1940s, particularly.
Yeah, another one was Get Happy. That was an opener. Yeah, and that was a Judy Garland song. Forget your troubles, come on, get happy.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I used to sing that a lot, to open, just to set the mood.
I bet you remember a lot of these, like even, from performing all that long ago, you probably did them so often, you'd be able to remember a lot of these ones now.
Do you want to test me?
Which one do you want to do?
Well, you just had a little taste of Get Happy. So get happy, get happy, get happy, or the judgment day.
I wasn't. I just want to say to everyone listening at home, I wasn't expecting you to do that. We hadn't sort of rehearsed that, so I'm so glad that just sort of came naturally, and I really enjoyed that. So thank you for doing that.
Good. It's always a joy to sing for you, Adam.
Well, thank you very much, and I enjoy it. And I remember, I'm trying to think, but years ago when I came over to Los Angeles and we were kind of sitting in your house there, and I think me and your husband Jared were working on something for the website or something similar. And I remember you were sort of just at the piano, just singing something, and what a joy to just be there and sort of hear that.
Oh yes, well, me and my piano,
a long relationship.
Yes, it's 1877 Steinway, and yeah, she holds a lot of memories.
Absolutely, yeah. When did you get her?
Oh gosh, in the 70s.
And she's made the move all sorts of places, hasn't she? From Los Angeles to Hawaii to back to here to there to everywhere. Yes,
even to Steinway in New York when she needed some repair.
Yeah. I'm kind of reminded as we're sort of talking about, Mickey Mouse and sort of what a I guess for so many kids, what a fantasy that must have been. But there's again kind of that I guess what we've called in some of our other episodes and what we speak about in the book is this juxtaposition. There was that bright, eloquent girl with a big voice on the Mickey Mouse Club. Whether you were being, doing that or counted on to do something else. But then there was what was going on behind the scenes. And I think your response to the Mickey Mouse Club is kind of a prime example where you're at the dinner table, for the regular family meeting about your career, and sort of Maury, your adopted dad, is talking about the idea of, you've been offered this opportunity to join the lineup of the Mickey Mouse Club, but he's like, no, you're a solo. We're not going to do that. And your internal dialogue at that time was being confused because you were sort of saying to yourself, well, first of all, I love the Mickey Mouse Club, but more than that, this is the plan for the family to be successful. Why wouldn't we do it? And why is my dad and manager turning this down? And again, I think it comes back to what we spoke about in our previous episode, that responsibility at such a young age for so many of these decisions.
And I had to go along with with whatever the decisions were that my parents made.
Yeah.
But yes, I was very taken back by his comment, and I had no idea he was going to say that. He just like blurted it out, and I don't know why. I mean, I understand that he had something in mind.
Yeah.
But the whole basis of this kind of idea that I was supposed to help to support the family was a possibility. That was the potential. And when he said after my audition and I was asked to be a Mouseketeer, Maury, who was standing next to me, said to the panel of adults that were listening to all the children who were auditioning, he just blurted it out. No, she's a solo.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I could not believe it. I would have loved, to have had that experience. But, that certainly is not the way it turned out. And then kind of a weird thing happened when I did receive my ears at the end, because they make you an honorary Mouseketeer
for life. I might add. I saw one of the I saw one of the certificates that they used to give out to the talent roundup when I was in Disney in Florida years ago, and it was one that was unfilled out, so it must have been one they had in the archives. It didn't have a name on it, but you're an honorary Mouseketeer for life, which is kind of cool.
Well, I have to say that I guess my mother decided that it was her trophy,
right?
And we had this shelf, that went to the ceiling in our one-story house, but it was too tall for me, and she put it on the top shelf, and I never I never had it.
Yeah.
It just collected dust on the top shelf. It was like, it's like her accomplishment, or,
Yeah.
her little trophy.
Yeah.
So, there was always that, like you were trying to emphasize with me, is how did I find the balance in life,
Mm-hmm.
To be able to perform, with joy,
Mm.
and yet sustain myself in kind of an oppressive kind of, family home. And I just have to shake my head and thank my lucky stars, and really thank all my angels and spirit for being there for me and helping me survive as well as I have. My friend Paul, getting
Yeah.
back to him, I called him on Christmas
Yeah.
this last year. It really hurt him to be a child actor and not be able to evolve, into an adult career,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
though he became an author and an organizer.
Yeah.
But like I say, I hope. I mean, it's not the end yet, but
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like I'm one of the ones that managed to find the balance,
Yeah. Yeah.
even unconsciously, or subconsciously. Somehow it occurred, and I'm very grateful for that.
Fantastic. And it's as I think our listeners will become aware, that took time, and that was a process. It wasn't just something that happened in that moment, but it took a lot of learning and a lot of thinking about it to sort of try to find that balance, and to be able to still find that joy in the singing. And I'm glad that even if it was just the one episode on Talent Roundup, that you got to do the Mickey Mouse Club. And I'm sure that everyone listening to this has enjoyed reliving some of those memories from that time, or those that are really interested in mid-century American pop culture enjoyed listening to some of those stories about performing on the Mickey Mouse Club.
It's really kind of crazy, isn't it, Adam, that somehow I was able to experience so many things in my life, in my young life, that are still so relevant. We started out with Batman.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about the Mickey Mouse Club. I mean, these personas have such a longevity and relevance in so many generations. So, it's just interesting. If you look at the black and whites and you go back to the 50s, okay, you may not, if you're a teenager now or a young person now, you may not relate to it as much as maybe my generation or even your generation that appreciated that era.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter, if you say Mickey Mouse or Mickey Mouse Club, just about everybody knows it.
Yeah, and what a joy it is as well. You say that and people light up to this day. It's something that has stuck around, but gives people that joy. The minute that song comes on, people know what they're listening to.
Yes, and then I will probably close this episode with MICKEY MOUSE. Yes.